I've always thought of Destiny 2 as a video game that allows you to push the limits of what can be done to the absolute maximum. You start off slow with completing your first Grandmaster, or your first raid, or your first dungeon, and seemingly moments later you're grabbing your first seal, or reaching a lighthouse for the first time, or even beating a master raid. So far on my journey, I've managed to help out Drifter with his scam, facilitate Zavala through his operations, and even scatter through different planets to help out miscellaneous folks throughout the system by achieving as many titles as I can get. I managed to get my hands on lost archives of exotics, but even after all of this, I still feel like I'm missing something. Now I'm starting to recall. Back when I was looking at the billboard, I did manage to find a small note, seems to be signed by Ikora. Upon approaching her, she was eerily silent and simply glanced at the contents of it, nudging me to inspect it by myself, apparently. The board note was as follows. Guardian, important intel was stolen from the Vanguard, specifically from my personal stash. If this gets in the wrong hands, the consequences would be unforeseeable. I ask you to silently venture into the possible spots that could host as stashes for these documents, but please, do this mission alone. Don't let anyone know about this, especially Zavala. According to the note, the first place that I need to scout by myself without fail to not get under Marasov's hot hand is Shattered Throne. Starting with Shattered Throne, I don't have a lot to say about this dungeon. You see, while it... What? Okay. I meant when it's... What the hell is happening? Pause. Anyway. Aw, goddammit, I can't see shit. Being the first dungeon of its kind with release of Forsaken, it seems to have suffered from some level of architectural design. Even with brightness to the max, I cannot see the half of what's happening. It feels like I'm in a modern subpar horror movie shot. Starting off with the Labyrinth, this is quite an unpleasant encounter to start off the dungeon with. It's dark, confusing, and mainly focuses on looking at the radar if you don't have the map memorized. But if you are intending to solo flawless it, I do recommend opening a map at a second monitor or in your brain, I don't know. One thing to note for this encounter is that you will be shot at, constantly. Taken enemies are known to be extremely aggressive, so have some sort of a heal source and you should be good. Next up is the Descent, which is a lengthy traversal with a good chunk of enemies. Do not underestimate this part and do not relax, because you will die at the bridge, and you will die at the cross section at least once. Bonus points if you are doing this on a Warlock because of situations like these. Oh man, I've been having so much fun in this dungeon. I've been doing so much progress lately. Wait, what is that shooting me in the back? Oh, I hate this. I hate this game so much. Alright, second time's the charm, it's fine. This time I'll actually take care of... Oh, never mind. Actually, never mind. This dungeon is a complete... And reminder, for some reason, those are treated as actual encounters, so if you die, it is game over and you have to start from the beginning. Now it comes to the first real encounter, which is the Ogre, or Wargeth, whatever you name it. It's more entertaining than the rest because you're actually doing something for once. Killing the wizards, starting the DPS phase, killing the Ogre, all of this provides actual gameplay and strategy, which wasn't required lots yet. Just make sure to not get... Ow. As for the tactics or loadout, it doesn't really matter now, as in the current time literally anything will melt through this boss like butter. Apparently the climb is considered part of the dungeon. This one is just a little walk before the final encounter, with some minor jumping. The only thing that can really screw you here is sweaty palms and pressure from the fact that you're this close to completing it. Walking past Thrallway does bring some memories though, certainly. And now we come to the juice of the dungeon, the creme de la creme, the final boss, the infamous Dol Inkaru, daughter of Savathun, the one behind the Dreaming City curse that has been ongoing for 4 years, the Great Hive Wizard. Wait, did I just one-face her?
You've so got this. Yeah, Noah, come on!
Let's go!
Noah! Noah! Yeah! Holy shit! I'm not sure where they just went, but solo flawless on the first try.
Yeah, it turns out she's a bit squishy if you play your cards right. She absolutely melts the Starfire Witherhoard combo, so as long as you keep aware of the knight's attacks and positioning to not get under a hot hand, you should be able to do it in one clear phase. To conclude, I managed to complete the solo flawless requirement on my first try of this attempt, so I wouldn't call it difficult per se, but this dungeon does have a couple of aces up his sleeve with how exactly it can ruin your day. So unless you're Mummy's Big Curse Breaker, I wouldn't say that it's worth your time. Not to mention that this is the only dungeon without its own specific loot pool, it's just Dreaming City loot. Also, this thing doesn't have a single rally banner place. Yeah, seriously, never again. As much as I could look around and scavenge, I didn't seem to find any Vanguard classified intel, so it's time to move on to our second possible location on the list, which is Pit of Heresy. For this one, I had to group up with Eris Morn to investigate further into Lunar Battlegrounds, as the intel could have been stolen by the Hive to get a strategical advantage. Referencing my previous video, most of Shadowkeep's content fell a bit flat under the metallic hand of power creep, this dungeon included. In terms of flavor and style, this dungeon is quite enticing and menacing. The Hive architecture and the fact that you can see the boss room at the very bottom in the first encounter manages to carry over the unsettling vibe that Shadowkeep was going with. Starting with Necropolis. This encounter is a bit similar to the Shattered Throne's first encounter, the Labyrinth, but this one is a bit more engaging and introduces us to the dungeon's main mechanics and its ultimate downfall, the wanky, bonkers, goofy ass sword targeting. I swear I have whiffed less Market Gardens in TF2 than I whiffed my sword hits with this. Out of the 3 targets, the hardest is the wizard by far though, so different from the other 2 that sometimes you might even need a second sword. The only real difficult part about this encounter is the overbearing and engulfing feeling of dread that comes with the realization of the fact that you'll be doing this shit every single time that your flawless gets ruined. You will start again, you will do the parkour section again, you will look for temples again. This part grabs your precious dad, 14 kids, 15 minutes per week to play Destiny 2 and throws it down the drain. Moving over to the next encounter, the Ogre's Maze, it gets quite easy once you get the hang of it and memorize the map a little bit, but under a good flow and muscle memory, you can get this one done pretty fast. I should also mention the fact that since Shadowkeep's release, the so invincible ogres turned from a horror part to a laughable stock. Thank you, resilience changes. Now we come to the scariest encounter this dungeon has yet to offer, conveniently named Chamber of Suffering. And it's true, you will suffer here, one way or the other. I wholeheartedly suggest a Well Warlock, a Lorelei or Bubble Titan, or anything that can keep your health above 0, because if all bosses in Destiny 2 are considered to be a damage check, this time it's flipped. You are a damage check to the enemies filling the room at a rapid pace. The tango of staying on the totem, killing the knight, dunking the orb, and repeat in a total of 6 times can easily flaw a flawless run. And that's okay, it can be quite hectic, but the latest changes with resilience and restoration can provide enough sustain to take care of it. Okay, you might think that what I'm about to say is some sort of a gag, or a joke, or a stitch, or a prank, but I'm fully, undoubtedly serious about this. The following drop to the next encounter, in my opinion, is the toughest part of this entire dungeon. You can skill issue me, you can warlock moment me, all you want, as much as your heart desires, but I will tell you, there is no worse enemy to a soul of flawless than overconfidence. You thought that the fact that you just survived the previous room grants you some sort of immortality? Because that's where the game shows you your place. That's where it grabs you by the nuts and tells you to go into your corner and think about what you did. Now, you might ask, what is the strat about this jump? How can I guarantee that I won't get tossed in a wall by a random spike out of nowhere? How do I time my jumps and fall into the rhythm of the obstacles? That's the neat part. You don't. In my personal Warlock experience, the only way I ever managed to surpass it is to simply do it in one jump. It's so crazy it might just work, and it works every time. Afterwards, we come to the Harrow, and this encounter is more dangerous than people make it out to be. Yes, you can memorize the map, you can pay attention to the radar, you can equip 100 mobility, heat rises, trance steps, anything to help you in parkour. But in the end, after all of that, you can simply fail to mantle and all of your progress will be gone and you'd have to start over again. I would say there is no worse way to lose a flawless run than right before the boss, and this is one of those scenarios. What I would suggest here is to keep your pace, stay calm, and take your time. And now we approach Zulmak, the final boss of the dungeon, through lore put here by Savathûn so we could increase our sword logic, only for us to grow stronger and eventually die to her by her plan to get her strength to all-time high. Now that we witnessed that it didn't happen, we can confirm that Zulmak is not really a threat either. I do appreciate his molten lava lamp design, and the encounter itself is quite artistic and engaging, using the mechanics we've learned back in Necropolis. Your only way to die here would be either to the wizard, I fucking hate this wizard, or greed. And by greed I mean to make sure to step out of the circle when the damage phase is about to end. It's not worth risking everything you've done so far to squeeze a little bit more damage, just step out. And now that we have defeated Zulmak, what conclusion can I come towards? Aesthetically, this is a very pleasing dungeon. Red architecture, hollow corridors, hostile environment. This activity is designed to stress you out, to lure you into the sense of dread, hopelessness, and claustrophobia. I believe if you're looking to start trying solo flawlessing dungeons, this would be the one to start, at least counting the factor that it has raid banner places. Once again though, I had no luck with finding Ikora's lost documents. All I could find was webs and dust and dead ghosts, but nothing else much. But my gut tells me that I'm getting closer to whatever this is. Upon hearing my request, Eris Morn decided to help me out once again, and Drifter figured to pay off the old debt of his by guiding me through the following dungeon, Prophecy. Maybe whatever prophecy this is, it could tell me where the stash is. I hope so. I'm growing pretty tired of this. Prophecy was released during Season of Arrivals and it was a big hit. It immediately stood out in terms of its uniqueness, art direction, and design. To this day, there's no other dungeon that I found more pleasing to simply look at. The skyboxes, world building, and level design are absolutely top-notch. After you step through the teleport, you're introduced to the entrance of the dungeon, which is made into this narrow, dim hallway full of various enemies, ranging from fragile thrall to surprisingly dangerous taken knights. This half encounter is supposed to teach the main mechanic of the dungeon, which is modes of light and dark. Those spawn when you kill the taken knights, and their type changes depending on your position. But you didn't come here for a basic prophecy tutorial, right? You came here to learn how to witness the Soul of Flawless path. Exactly. That's why we chug a grenade and fling ourselves into the hole in the ceiling, skipping the entirety of this encounter, to immediately progress into the next phase, which is Phalanx Echo.
Look, lady, whatever you're selling, I ain't buying, yo.
Well, my name is Skylar White, yo. My husband is Walter White, yo. He told me everything.
I'll be completely honest here. This is where most heroes end their journey. This boss, this area is brutal. ruthless and relentless for a starting solo flawless dungeoneer. There are almost no save spots, there's no cheese, besides one-shotting him through some very ugly gloves, but we'll not go into that. It's a test in form of a pure, concentrated fist to the face. If you're planning on doing this dungeon solo flawlessly, this is where you will probably die most commonly. Reasons being aplenty: adds, architects, overwhelming amount of damage, thrown off a cliff, list goes on. The meta in Lodos for the boss change over time, but for now I would recommend something like Loreley Bonking Titan, Element Well Warlock, or an Invis focused Tether Hunter. I am unsure whether to consider the inherent difficulty of the first encounter a curse or a blessing. Yes, you might be stuck here for hours upon end with a sour feeling of not doing too much progress in your journey. That's how I felt. But there are two upsides to this. First is, you are building up stamina, your resistance, and you're taught to not give up so easily in the very beginning. Second is, after you do learn how to beat it and you do it successfully without dying for the first time, you get this first proper dose, first breath of determination and self-realization. Holy shit, I've actually done it. I did it. I killed the guy. Nothing can stop me now. And for that factor, the dungeon is partially true. Upon defeating Phalanx Echo without a scratch, you are hit with an understanding that you have surpassed the main roadblock that stopped people from solo flawlessing it before. So good job on you. Now you just gotta do like the other 65% of the dungeon. Next up is the desert section. While providing us with a stunning imagery, it's not exactly mechanic heavy. Roam around, shoot some blights, follow ball of energy, proceed. Two tips that I could give here: Bastion one-shots the blights, and don't rush. Boosting into the wrong cube did cost me a flawless run. Now we come to the cube. This one seems to be a struggle for most players, not because of the technical difficulty, but more on the mechanical side. It seems that people are struggling to imagine a cube in a 3D space in their head, but that's fine, because the one in the middle should provide a good enough example. This encounter for a solo flawless is not a test of skill, rather a test of endurance, because it can go on for quite a while. My tips here would be to use Xenophage to one-shot the goblins, and to slide out of the middle instead of being sucked, as it gives you a better window to shoot the goblins before they disappear. If you manage to do that, you will spawn the Taken Knights into the next room immediately, but that's more of a speedrun strat rather than something vital for surviving. I can also provide a helpful image about what exactly to do when Toland is at the top of the room. Basically, you just need to flip it twice, and you need to go in the direction where there are no symbols in the middle cube. That's it. After you're done with the cube, you are met with the section named by most of the community Rainbow Road. There are multiple different approaches to this section, including slipstreaming, sparrow flying, wall skating, but for a solo flawless I suggest a careful, methodical and slow approach. There is no timer on this encounter, and you are allowed to take this ride as slow and calm as possible, as this is the calm before the storm. The storm being the final boss of the dungeon. I want to preface with this: if you got to the final boss of Prophecy Dungeon solo flawlessly, that is already a huge achievement, and you should respect yourself for the dedication invested so far. However, this boss is where the boys become men. This is a culmination of everything you have learned so far. Mechanics, dedication, strategy, quick thinking, endurance, all of it combined into one pie of one big damage check. For this part I can't suggest much because once again the meta changes quite frequently, but among some general tips: don't be afraid to run two specials like a Witherhoard and a Fusion. 2. Remember about the ogre that spawns when you dunk the most. 3. Do everything in your power to save-proof falling off an edge in the damage zone. If you fall, or get teleported, or get too many debuff stacks, it is a certain game over, so it's better to treat it safe and do one more damage phase rather than panic and fall to your certain doom. Coming to a conclusion, I think this is the hardest dungeon I have yet to review so far. My main concern is the flow of the encounters. Let's imagine you've been doing solo flawless until the boss, and then you died at the boss. Frustrating, yes, but you're ready to do it again. The issue is that you're immediately met back with the Phalanx Man that abolishes all that is bad with Destiny's physics engine. Completing the first boss over and over again can be quite demotivating, as its slow nature can ruin the flow of the entire dungeon. But once you have come victorious, you get the coolest ghost shell and emblem in the game, so we can't really complain, can we? Other than that, this is without a doubt my favorite dungeon of all time. The design and art direction of this dungeon make it a long-standing and endless piece of content for me, and weapons are almost always worth grinding, whether it's for PvP or PvE. If you were to solo flawless only one dungeon out of all of them, I would absolutely recommend this one. Now, upon defeating Kel Echo, I realized that Prophecy is supposed to represent something regarding Beyond Light and the Sunset content, not the package I was looking for. Wow, what a bunch of time wasted, but at least that's one more possible location off the list. Now it's down to 2. I decided to bring Fallen into the equation. There's a small chance they might have stolen it, so I ventured into an old, deep myth about fallen pirates deep underneath the Cosmodrome. Whatever I find here, it might come beneficial either way. While I mentioned Grasp in the previous video, in this video I would like to go a bit more in detail specifically about the solo flawless experience. Being released with the 30th anniversary event, this dungeon hosts home to no one else but Gjallarhorn, so pretty much anyone who comes from the Epic Games Store would experience this one way or another. The real challenge, of course, comes for a man who decides to perfect it and complete the entire thing by himself without dying. The biggest issue that I have with this dungeon is that most of the time you will be on a tight timer, which will not really let you relax or really think it through or grab a cup of coffee. Grasp of Avarice, at least to my personal experience and feel, has the longest section before the first actual encounter. Getting to the loot cave, going past the traps, doing that entire 4D chess play with the cannon, only to die at the ogre, completely soul-crushing. It does introduce the mechanics of the cannon and Burdened by Riches debuff, but in your ongoing attempts to perfect this dungeon, this will be just a chore. But now coming to the first proper boss, Fields of Minecraft, things can get a bit tricky. Earlier I've mentioned a tight timer, and it's true, 30 seconds is not a lot of time, and going with the dungeon's theme, you might die if you get too greedy. Also, the Ogre's Beam can catch you off guard, even if you have max protection. So, you have 3 opponents in this encounter: Time, Greed, and a fat health bar. This guy eats damage for breakfast, so make sure to bring your most deadly arsenal: Witherhoard, Lament, anything. I wouldn't particularly recommend anything explosive, because in some cases this guy does like to get up close and personal, but if you optimize your damaging strat, it shouldn't be more than a 4 phase. Then it comes to the... I usually have a defined and accustomed path that I like to take, which you can see in the following clip. I don't know if it's the most consistent option, but it works for me. Make sure to wait a second or redo your Sparrow at the points to recharge your boost, and for the love of all that is holy, please use Always on Time. Now we come to the Fallen Shield encounter, which is possibly the easiest of the bunch. This is your endurance and patience test, so as long as you take your time, everything is gonna be fine. Actually, upon replaying it, I found it quite relaxing almost. I definitely fell in with the flow of the encounter, so it's gonna be fine, as long as you don't recognize the bodies in the water. Don't recognize the bodies in the water. Don't recognize the bodies in the water. And after all of that slog, we come back to the boss Avarok. It might seem intimidating at first, but I personally didn't find the boss to be too hard. The biggest obstacle in this fight is the fact that there's really not a single patch of land that is safe. You will always be in danger, you will always be shot at, and that factor of not really having any room or time to breathe is what can get you. Thankfully there's lots of cover in the area, so this is one of the times when using cover is actually extremely beneficial for your survivability. I personally used Witherhoard, Starfire, and a Demolitionist rocket launcher, and the damage phases were pretty smooth. Just make sure to cover your eyes from time to time because of stuff like this.
Deploying flashbang.
But if you're skilled enough, this shouldn't take you more than 3 or 4 phases. As a conclusion, the only way I can really describe this dungeon is, well, slow. the entrance, the ogre, the fallen shield, most of these things with a 30-second timer are about testing your greed and your endurance, not particularly your thumb skill. So it's all about taking it nice, slow and easy, and being aware of your surroundings. I just cleared out a whole pirate crew, and I still didn't find that intel? How? This must be some sort of prank, a lure, a scheme. What place do I need to visit to find this guarded, secret intel? This well protected and hidden? I have to venture deep into Calus's brain. Of course, how did I not think of that? The kind Eris Morn, more than happy to help me for the third time. Maybe she knows something I don't? Nonetheless, this is the last place marked on the map, so it must be here. I can't postpone it any longer, huh? It's finally time to talk about Duality, the latest and freshest dungeon released. It came through its own dungeon key purchase, which has suffered through a lengthy layer of criticism from the side of the fanbase. And honestly, I don't see the big deal. People say it's $20, but for me it's only $9.99, so I'm not sure what the fuss is about. In reality, I have a love-hate relationship with this dungeon. Clearing it on day one was an absolute shitfest, but clear after clear, we became kind of close. Almost like besties that say that they hate each other. This dungeon has broken me on so many levels that I could never be unbroken. Haha, get it? I would say that the introduction of the dungeon and the beginning stroll up to the first boss is actually quite pleasing. Definitely less monotonous than the one to Grasp or Pit. It's quite uncommon if you were to die here, unless you're doing a speedrunning strat. Don't do the speedrunning strat when you're solo flawlessing, it's not worth it. Ah, Galran, my beloved. I see he put himself in shape after the Crown of Sorrow incident. And by putting in shape, I mean this mother trucker is better at dancing and hopping around than an actual professional ballerina. This man needs to take some Adderall because he will not stay still. You could use Lament for this, but I have to put a disclaimer. The combination of this man's maneuvers and the poor hit registration of the Lament might actually cause nausea.
I love sword targeting.
This encounter is long, like really long. It takes a long time to set up the damage phase. It feels dragging, especially when you're not doing the confusing Scion bug that somehow refreshes the timer. I would say that for Warlocks, this is a 5 phase on a good day, if you're not using the Penta Ultimate Sweatlord meta stuff. But if you are on this semi-guide, semi-journey, semi-investigation, you probably aren't. This guy doesn't have an enrage mechanic, so you can have as many attempts as you want, as many damage phases as you can squeeze out of your remaining mental fortitude. Unfortunately, we are just getting started. You might not believe what I say here, but this place, yeah, this place right here, is my personal doom. It's called the Crypt for a reason, mostly because half of these tombs are possibly hosting my previous characters and their attempts. A wrong jump there, a bad mental here, an unlucky sword targeting there, and boom, you're done. And please, please be careful around the death slide. It will kill you at least once. And yes, this jump too. Once you come to the puzzle room, it's quite easy. The statue's rotation is always set to be the same, so you shouldn't have any issues with this. Now we come to the vault encounter. Wait, no, wrong vault, sorry. The vault encounter. If you can, save the locations of the bells somewhere on the second monitor or something. The biggest lesson that you can learn here, similar to Galran, is that you can only do one buff per run, and it's really monotonous, but you cannot do two. You cannot do two buffs from one run in the Nightmare Realm. Once again, you have to play this one slow and methodical. My usual path would be like this. Stand near the symbol I need, shoot the bell on the opposite side, kill bellkeepers immediately, grab the symbol and scoot out of there. 8 or so symbols later and you're there. Make sure to grab a waveframe grenade launcher or something and you're good. Little bit of jumps here and there and you're finally at the final showdown. Caiatl, Calus's biggest shame. This encounter sucks dick and balls. There is no other way to say it. There's no way around it. This is the hardest part of any dungeon from this entire video. It's swarmed with ads, it's overwhelming in damage and debuffs, it's highly inconsistent in terms of the damage phase. But worst of all, it understands that this is your final push, so it goes all out on the architects. I haven't mentioned these prior, but you will be seeing the architects' names so many times that you'll pretty much know each other better than friends from high school. You have to understand, you are no longer fighting a boss, you are no longer fighting enemies inside a video game. At this point, in this particular encounter, you are fighting the game itself. You are Neo, and this is your Matrix, and it will do everything in its absolute power to leave no trace of you, to crumble you to dust, to crush your spirit and suck the life out of you through a plastic, non-biodegradable straw. Strategy, you ask? My strategy is Titan, Loreley Splendor, yes, even with the nerf, 100 resilience, healing grenades, throwing hammer, lament. As you finalize the idea that you're fighting the game in its purest game engine form, you will grab each and every last possible crutch that you have in your arsenal. You will be as mean to the game as the game is mean to you, and you will be the immovable object that so desperately needs its unstoppable force, which is Caiatl and the architects behind the place. And you will not die to the Bellkeeper's backpacks, and you will not teleport Caiatl by herself into the Shadow Dimension, and you will not get teleported into a death screen, and you will not be slowed by Centurions mid-jump, and you will not get sniped by science or eaten by dogs. You will abuse the living shit out of damage resistance and constant healing, and you will come victorious, O Dungeoneer mine, and you shall grow fat from strength and wear the newly acquired emblem with pride. I traveled back to Eris, hands full of flasks oozing with Callus's memories of, luckily, exactly what I needed. What could the Callus know? What could he had seen that is entombed so deep within his mind space that I had to dig it out with a psychic shovel? Is it something related to the Witness in Lightfall? Could we finally see the final shape? Eris, turn on the monitors. I don't care that it's classified. I need to know after everything I've been through. Ikora? Are those pictures of your feet?
Oh my god, bro.